Welcome to another episode of the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, your weekly dose of news and advice that comes to your pocket every single Saturday. Holding it down, here we got Mac, Mark, Scott, and Landon. Enjoy today's show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host this week, Scott, and today we've got the guys, Mac, Mark, and Landon. And today we're talking about my boy, the one, the only, the mythical, the Minnesota Miracle leaping receiver, Stefon Diggs.
Yeah.
He was passionate. We all loved watching him play in Minnesota, but alas, time moves on and he has been shipped to the Buffalo Bills for a haul of 3 picks, including the 22nd pick in this year's 2020 rookie draft. Guys, this is a tough one because I love Stefon Diggs and I think he's super talented, but from a football perspective, I understand why he had to move and he did not want to be in Minnesota. I think he's fired up to move to the Bills, and I actually think he could hold some value for owners this year in fantasy. Now, Diggs had an astounding 17 yards per reception average last season. That's great for fantasy, but it also lets you know the way he was used in the offense. He was an elite deep threat and nothing else. Not a real sustainable way to actually run a power run offense, which I believe is what the Vikings are going for. But when it comes to fantasy, I really think that an elite deep threat in a good situation can pay dividends. Josh Allen picks up the mantle and will have to keep Diggs happy because he is a fiery competitor and he will speak his mind and throw his helmet. So I would say he's on my draft board if it's a reasonable ADP, but he comes with the caveat of if things don't go his way and he's not getting tosses, look out around week 5, week 6. I feel like the whole Bills sideline is going to hear about it. Mark, what's your take on the once Viking legend, now Bill, Stefon Diggs?
Yeah, so what's not to like about the guy? He's extremely talented. His last year, he put up great numbers just on the average catch. You know that he was playing that role of a deep threat. And the year before last, he had an even more tremendous season where he recorded over 100 catches. He had 150 targets. So 2 years ago, we saw a receiving core on Minnesota where Adam Thielen was firing out all cylinders every game. Stefon Diggs firing out all cylinders every game. Both these guys together were like peanut butter and jam. Last year, however, Adam Thielen missed, let's say, about half the season, which put Stefon Diggs in that number 1 receiver role. So he did do well yardage-wise, and he was startable, but also at the same time, he was a really emotional guy. He was he was vocal about it if he didn't get the ball. He kind of throws tantrums when things don't go his way on the field. So when he was a Minnesota Viking, that was a run-first offense. He still got it done as a receiver. And it's kind of a testament to his grit, I think, when you look at his numbers. He did only manage to haul in 6 TDs, which I think that number stands to go up this year with him on the Bills. But to touch on another thing that I see on the Bills is I think there's more elements to that offense. There's more depth than what I was seeing in the receiving core on Minnesota. What I mean by that is he's not going to be the only option for Josh Allen, where I felt at times that he was the only option for Kirk Cousins last year. With Adam Thielen out, it definitely left some big holes that weren't to be filled by BC Johnson or Kyle Rudolph or Irv Smith. So when you look at this Bills offense now, there is another great receiver in John Brown. There is a couple threats at tight end with Dawson Knox, young guy. I think he's only going to build this season. Cole Beasley, who's a role player on that offense, and he's going to get it done too. I just feel like Josh Allen is going to turn things up a little bit in the passing game. And actually, while we can compare Josh Allen to Kirk Cousins, Josh Allen actually threw the ball more than Cousins last year. He didn't have as many completions as him, but we do know that the volume can be there. And I don't know. I just feel like the only part of my mind that is giving a little bit of doubt on the whole situation is the run first mentality in Buffalo. Between Devin Singletary and Josh Allen, it just leaves some question marks. I love Stefon Diggs, but maybe Matt can touch on this mentality that I just spoke about.
Yeah, I think for me, like going into 2020 with Diggs, anytime a player goes to a new team, it's certainly something that piques your interest. You always want to think, hey, what could be the potentials, the unknowns? That's all fun. But for me, I don't want to take Stefon Diggs as my wide receiver one. I think that he going to Buffalo presents a little bit more volatility with Josh Allen and the Bills than he did in Minnesota. I mean, Kirk Cousins is a career 70% passer, even though he had a career low 444 attempts last year. He still completed more than Josh Allen. So for him, 69.1%, it's always been quality for Kirk, not quantity. Josh Allen struggling to get out of the 50% completion range. So for Stefon Diggs, it's going to be tough. Like for him, he sits on the opposite side of the field as presumably John Brown, who is also an athletic field stretcher, plays very similarly to Stefon Diggs. Cole Beasley, Dawson Knox are going to take up a majority of the middle of the field and will serve as the possession receivers. So for me, like I think if Diggs is to take that next level on a run-first team, he needs to sort of transform his game a little bit into more of a Devontae Adams type, work a little bit more of the field to be relevant. Because let's face it, Buffalo wants to run the ball. They have a mobile quarterback. They have a sophomore running back in Devin Singletary, and with their focus being on the ground, he threw for more attempts than Kirk last year by like 20, but they're still under 500 pass attempts per year. So they're not in a pass-first offense. They're in a run-first offense, and Stefon Diggs will be handicapped by that. So Stefon Diggs represents for me like a volatile wide receiver 2. I'd be comfortable with him in like a flex position, but I don't want to take Diggs as, my wide receiver 1 or even 2 next year. So I think just with, again, name value and the potential of what could be in Buffalo, I'm out. And I hate to say I'm out on so many of these guys, but I just don't understand how things get better for Stefon Diggs going from Minnesota to Buffalo. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I think his ADP should reflect that. But if it doesn't, I'm definitely not going to reach for him.
You make some really good points. Everyone makes good points. I personally believe that Stefon Diggs, pound for pound, is one of the better receivers in the league, and I completely agree with you, Mac, is that he needs to take a really big step this year to be that number one. And first of all, I do think he's going to make Josh Allen a better quarterback. Like you touched on, he's a 50. Last year, Josh Allen threw for about 58.9%. But based on his receivers, he threw more catchable balls than that. He should have been closer to that 63% mark, which would have brought him closer to like what Jared Goff passed for this past year.
That's still low though.
It's still fairly low, but not to say he can't improve. I think a guy like Stefon Diggs can really improve. Whereas Kirk Cousins threw closer to 70%, but he threw a lot more uncatchable balls, but his receivers were elite with Diggs and Thielen. So he actually should have been about 5% lower than what he actually completed this past year, which that's Stefon Diggs. That's these guys making these tough catches where most quarterbacks, most receivers wouldn't come down to it. That's what will bring Stefon Diggs consistency. Josh Allen is actually one of the quarterbacks that throws. He's actually fourth best in yards per or intended air yards, or fifth in 2019 for intended air yards. So he is pushing the ball down the field. And what we saw last year with Stefon Diggs, he's an elite deep threat receiver. He's the guy that could run every route in the route tree last year. And I'm really torn on what to do with him. He is going, out of the receivers we've done this week, he is going the highest. He's going in the 4th round. It could go up. The hype around him could be elite. He's going to want to prove that he's going to be that elite receiver, that locked and loaded number one guy. They're going to force him the ball because they gave up so many draft picks to get him. Whether or not Josh Allen does just take off and run like he normally does, that's yet to be seen. But
Lando, I just wanted to add one more thing here.
Yeah.
I also was looking at Josh Allen and his intended air yards because I think that's a really good next gen stat because it does speak to
9.4.
the intentions of the quarterback. He ranked high in that category. However, yards per completion, he was one of the lowest amongst starting quarterbacks in the league, 6.7. So his intentions and his realizations, the actual balls he did complete, a massive difference for Josh Allen. So yeah, like his intentions and what he's able to do and what he wants to do on the field are two different things right now. So.
But if he has a quality receiver, like what I said, he hasn't had a guy like him before. John Brown isn't that elite wide receiver, so maybe that number will go up.
Maybe.
Well, with 1130 yards last season, 6 touchdowns on, I believe it was only 63 receptions, we all know that his per catch average has got to come down.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm forecasting him for roughly the same numbers. So whether you think the ADP in Buffalo makes sense, I see a slight uptick in his future in the touchdown department, as I think they're going to need to rely on him a lot more, as there is no Thielen opposite as there was with the Vikings. But only time will tell. He's going to be definitely a real story to watch in Buffalo, as his personality can be larger than his catches. All right, guys. Well, if you're here, thanks for sticking around. This concludes Wide Receiver Week, where we touched on Brandon Cooks, the young phenom Juju, maybe, and my boy, Stefon Diggs. Make sure to check us out on our socials. You can find us on Instagram at snap_fantasy. And make sure to check us out here on YouTube every week. Make sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell to make sure you're notified every time we have content coming out. We're putting out weekly segments 3 times a week sometimes. So we really enjoy having you here as part of the community. Leave a comment. Where do you think Diggs should go in the draft? Is he boom or bust? All right, guys. See you next time.